Mr. Chairman. I am offended, personally, by your calling the Attorney General a liar.
Unfortunately, over the course of these hearings and this investigation, that focus, that seriousness of purpose regarding the loss of Agent Terry has been lost.
That's what we promised the family, to find out how it happened, which we've done, and then we promised them reform, which we're not doing.
Well, Democrats on the House Oversight Committee arguing this week that a possible U.S. House vote citing Attorney General Eric Holder for contempt of Congress is out of line. But Republicans defending the move, saying the goal is to uncover the truth about the now highly controversial Fast and Furious gun-running sting. This contempt vote has inflamed the debate on both sides, and now that President Obama has asserted executive privilege over some of the documents in question, many are wondering what's next. Joining us now, one of the congressmen that was in this week's hearing, Republican Patrick Meehan. Welcome, Congressman. Great to have you here today.
Hey, nice to be with you, Uma.
You know, Eric Holder says his offer still stands, that he is willing to hand over some of the documents sought by House Republicans if they're willing to drop the contempt vote by the full House set for next week. Is there any wiggle room here for some kind of compromise, or has the president's executive privilege order eroded any move to stop this vote?
Well, I hope the executive privilege challenge doesn't create a roadblock to some kind of meaningful negotiation, but in fact you have to have a meaningful negotiation. Look, as part of the Justice Department having been in these kinds of negotiations, the Justice Department itself would not accept that kind of a representation from somebody that says, look, I'm going to determine what the documents are, I'm going to view selectively some of those documents, and you make a representation to me ahead of time that you will cease this investigation. So that what they're asking for, in my mind, just isn't practical. You would generally create some kind of a privilege log. There has been a representation that there's as many as 80,000 responsive documents, and yet only about 7,600 have been turned over. So who gets to choose what is relevant? And I think this is a large part of that offer, is that it's in many ways a very narrow offer, and in some would suggest not even a real one.
Well, you know, the White House spokesman Jay Carney is calling the Republican-led investigation a politically motivated, taxpayer-funded election year fishing expedition. Those are his words. What's your response to that?
Well, I think that's what you do, is you start to attack the investigation and you rely on the fact that you try to make it political. I'm a prosecutor by profession, and trying to look at this thing dispassionately. But by virtue of that experience, I know the kind of information that is shared within the Justice Department. We have whistleblowers, and the fact of the matter is they've brought documents which include the affidavits of probable cause, which are part of the wiretap applications. At the highest levels of the Justice Department, they're making representations to the court regarding certain facts, and those facts are brought to the attention, these allegations are brought to the attention at the highest level of the Justice Department. So we know information that's been before them, and in my mind it's a very direct connection, and now the question is, who knew what, and what did they do once they were confronted with that information? To me, the frustration is not just the stonewalling, but the evidence as well that there has been intimidation by the Justice Department of some of those people who were whistleblowers.
So are you charged with a big cover-up that's going on out there right now?
Well, I don't want to make any kind of calculated assessment at this point in time. Again, you go on the facts, but when we see the facts, we begin to see them as they've dripped out, and we've gotten access to certain documents. At the hearing the other day, I pointed to the fact that the very prosecutor that they sent from Washington down to Arizona sent back an email, which we have, in which she identified the fact that, you know, guns had been walked, 300 to 500. Well, who got that? Well, we know it went to the head of the criminal division gang unit. Now, who did that gang unit head talk to with that very specific, very clear, unambiguous information? So we're getting denials that the Justice Department knew anything about gun walking, and yet limited facts that we do have directly contravene it. So, you know, these are just logical questions any prosecutor or investigator would ask, and the fact of the matter is you can't let the Justice Department be beyond accountability.
Let me ask you this, though, and I want to say for our viewers, we did reach out to Democratic members of the committee who declined our invitation to appear on this program. But isn't it true, even if you get the full House to vote a contempt, hold Attorney General Eric Holder in contempt, the decision to prosecute will be left to the Justice Department in the end, and who's at the head of the Justice Department? Eric Holder. So do you really expect to see any of these documents that you're really trying to go after? And as far as prosecuting the situation, what's next?
Well, that would be a decision to prosecute it criminally. And that decision would be made by the Justice Department, the United States Attorney, but it would be very likely he would be instructed not to bring a criminal charge. But there is a separate and probably the more effective place we ought to be, which would be an ability to ask for a court to come in a civil resolution in which the demand would that the court compel the Justice Department to bring the documents before them and make the case in camera as to why they believe they're privileged and why Congress ought not to have access to them. So I suspect that what you will see is a civil resolution, but you're probably going to see this thing slow walked. It'll take a long period of time to get through it all, and I think part of the objective here is for the Justice Department to call this political, to have it all handled as sort of a political aspect, and to embroil it in, in the campaign season. I don't want to see campaigns be part of this, and I don't want to see politics be part of it. Just the facts.
I understand, Congressman. We really do appreciate you joining us today and sharing your insights with us. And so, of course, we're going to be monitoring the developments very closely and waiting to see if that vote actually takes place next week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Uma.
Great to see you.
Great to be with you.
Now it's your turn to